People are being more judicious with what they go see in a theater, yes, but people will absolutely still show up if you give them something to show up for. Summer ending with $3.67 billion, nearly even with last year, 2024, thanks to weapons. Labor Day misses $4 billion projection. And here's an update for us. So the industry presumed that we would have a $4 billion box office this summer. That has fallen short. That's fallen short by about 300 million at this point from what it seems. And this is going to roll through Labor Day. So that's tomorrow. That's it. Add a little bit, but that's where we are. Not good to be down year over year. That's for sure. But let's go to the article here from Anthony D'Alessandro. After a Saturday morning update, a pretty anemic Labor Day box office, which will get the summer box office to $3.67 billion in an updated ComScore figure, which is 0.2% down from last year's summer with 3.677. So not even going to best last year. That ain't no good, right? We'll get into the hows and ways of summer later, but May was the only month that was up this year over last May, plus 76%, obviously thanks largely to Lilo and Stitch, while June, July, and August were all down. All 3 months totaled at $2.68 billion. That's 13% down from a year ago. There was this heavy pressure out there for the marketplace to deliver a $4 billion plus May to Labor Day total, a figure which was constant for the summer domestic box office since 2012, except for 2017. The pandemic in 2020, recovery 21, 22, 24, and now this year. Interesting to note that this summer was ahead of 22's $3.4 billion, but behind 2017's $3.85, when the top movie was Wonder Woman that summer. Can't believe it's been that long. As of right now, 2025 remains ahead of the 24 box office by 4% for the year, with a running cum Jan 1 through August 30th of $5.99 billion. However, watch September put us behind Sans a Beetlejuice. That's amazing. September, I mean, that movie performed pretty well, but I think you've got two movies out there that could do it. Conjuring and Demon Slayer, which we'll get to in a little bit. I think that might surprise folks at what those two put together. Warner Brothers' Weapons kids remain the it click, as the Zach Cregger-directed movie is coming in at $12.4 million over the Labor Day weekend. $83 million now for the total weekend, 25% down from a year ago. Last Labor Day was powered by summer holdovers, Deadpool and Wolverine. No surprise. This year, studios have gone back to their indie film dumping ground ways over summer finales, movies which aren't good enough for the film festivals or award season, but sort of transmit the message to upscale audiences that serious fare is coming. The studios have done it for years. The one Labor Day theatrical exception, off the top of my head, which actually made serious roads into the award season space, was The Constant Gardener. I mean, Whoopi does from ages ago. This year, this will get down to it. This year, we have in second place Universal's 50th anniversary re-release of Jaws, which is eyeing a $9.8 million 4-day after a $3 million Friday. Some see Jaws at $10 million over the 4 days. IMAX was a big deal here, delivering $2.2 million of the weekend, or 21% from 400 IMAX screens, and I was at one of them yesterday. So good on that. And look, this should lead, to some concern here. What we're looking at and theaters, I'm sure, do not like this right now, right? You don't want to ever see these stories where you've got the box office really struggling year over year. Now, the problem is that, again, when you look at the titles that came out this summer, you would think that, hey, we had enough there, right? In terms of big summer movies, there were enough there that should have carried it over the top. There probably should have been another $300 million in there somewhere to meet that $4 billion projection. The problem is the movies just aren't engaging the audiences. And this is what it ultimately boils down to. Now, some of them, like I said, like F1 was a big surprise. Nobody expected F1 to pull its weight the way that it did. Now, imagine if something like F1 didn't do that, wasn't a surprise, or if Weapons wasn't as much of a surprise as it's been so far. The summer could have been a whole hell of a lot worse because, again, nobody really expected those movies to do what they did at the outset. And you've got this from THR along the same lines. And I mean, you got kind of the same flavor here of what we got from the Deadline article. All had assumed that this year's summer lineup would have the strength to equal or surpass the 4.09 billion grossed in 2023, but it isn't going to be, leaving studio execs and exhibitors in a state of shock as they wrestle with how to operate in a new world order where moviegoing might never return to pre-COVID levels. One studio that's still smiling is Warner Brothers, which has been on a dazzling winning streak. And yeah, you got to give them credit for that. I'm very, very nervous for the future, says one top studio executive. There are all these studios and companies making movies. I don't think that there's enough of an audience for them. That's not a sentiment that theater owners or many other studios share. They think the solution is more product delivered to their big screens. There's two sides to this. They're both right and they're both wrong. We get another one of these situations. There's some truth to both sides of the argument here, right? We have, especially leading up to COVID, you had so many movies coming out every year, a glut of films, and probably more than there should have been. They were hitting theaters. It was a glut of product. And it does make it difficult because a lot of these little small, they get buried, right? You get these movies that get buried behind the juggernauts. People are being more judicious with what they go see in a theater. Yes, the pricing of movie tickets these days certainly does have something to do with it. There's no question about that. But people will absolutely still show up if you give them something to show up for. And while I don't think that there needs to be necessarily another wad of wet spaghetti hurled against the wall, okay, to see what sticks, I do think, however, that studios need to be taking a careful look at A, how much they're spending on these films, and B, what they're actually putting into theaters and how many of them they're making. Would you rather be Disney this year that has thrown, or will by the end of the year, 7 major titles, $200 to $300+ million production budgets? Let's throw Avatar out for a second because, again, it's Disney distributed, but it's not Disney owned. It's James Cameron. It's Lightstorm Entertainment that has the deal with Disney for distribution because Disney bought Fox. But let's look at the actual Disney stuff, right? You look at 3 Marvel movies, right? You look at Captain America, Brave New World. You look at Fantastic Four. You look at Thunderbolts, right? None of those really did much. In fact, collectively lost hundreds of millions of dollars for Disney. It's too much that you can make up for with PVOD and everything else. And then again, Disney, they don't put them out anywhere. They go to Disney Plus, and that's the end of it. So there's no additional revenue for them to make there. But these weren't things that were drawing people in. So how many of these do you really need to make? Well, Disney's kind of pulling back on that because, again, there's no other Marvel movie. There's no Disney distributed Marvel movie coming out between now and Doomsday. You got Sony that's going to be distributing Spider-Man, which, yes, is built in tandem with with Disney Marvel Studios. But this is not, I mean, there's going to be a huge gap. And when we're talking about the fact that, movies have not recovered to pre-COVID levels and they may never, if you go back basically from 2012, 2013, when the ramp up started, and you go all the way through to 2019, once you take the Marvel movies out, we're not that far off from where we were. I mean, the Marvel Cinematic Universe was almost single-handedly responsible for some of the biggest hauls, taking these overall global numbers and sending them through the charts. Remember, in there we had the first Star Wars movie that came out in 2015, the first Disney Star Wars movie, I should say, right? A lot of jubilation for that. That's gone. So really the suffering at the box office is largely because the financial success that overwhelmingly the Walt Disney Company had with Marvel, for about the 6 or 7 years leading up to COVID, that's gone. It's gone. When you look at the rest of the stuff out there, there's a lot more parity out there. And what I mean by that is if you were to go back and take those movies out, from 2012 to 2019 from Disney, those Marvel movies, and then look more or less how everything else performed. And yeah, you got some surprises out there like Joker that turned in $1 billion box office. You got a few things in there that would sneak up on you. And certainly there were some things that still performed better. And habits for movie theaters were different back then than they are today. My point is that I think, trying to write this off is all of a sudden, movie theaters are doomed. They're never going to get back to where they were. They can. And I think the fact that when we see films like this from Warner Brothers that seem to overperform, even things like F1 from Apple / Warner Brothers, you get these horror movies that tend to pull in normie audiences out there unusually, things like Weapons and Sinners even. There is definitely some hope out there. People will go back. People want to go back. And there's stories out there about that. So, this idea that, no, I think the theaters are right. We need more content from Hollywood. And look, when Amazon starts kicking in next year with more theatrical releases, hopefully Netflix will come around with its success with K-pop Demon Hunters, although I think Netflix is going to be stubborn and hold out. I think they're going to continue to do that for a while. It's going to make it difficult, but it's not impossible. We don't want theaters to go away. We really, really don't. Hollywood can't afford to have theaters go away, to be fair, because they cannot make the money. They cannot make the money from streaming. Netflix cannot buy everything out there. Netflix can't pay for everything from Sony and from Universal and from Warner Brothers and Paramount, and throw in Amazon in there as well. They can't just buy everything up from every studio. And the studios can't afford to just make $200 and $300 million products and then dump them on streaming. You've got to have theatrical out there. You need a healthy theatrical system. Otherwise, you're going to have much bigger problems down the road. You're going to see a lot of these major franchises disappear. Since June 13th, we've had just one up weekend, which was July 11 through 13, when Superman opened. ComScore box office chief analyst Paul, that guy, Dergarabedian. That guy. Beginning July 18th, the domestic box office has been down every weekend for 6 weekends in a row compared to last year. The result, year over year, much needed advantage has diminished to a mere 5%. Hopefully that will change. And I think people are looking towards the end of the year right now, especially with things like Avatar, which is probably going to be $1 billion film. I still don't understand how those are $1 billion films. I really genuinely don't. I mean, it's like F1. There's a lot more people in the international box office that boost those sales. China's a big market for Avatar, which means they don't get much money back from it. But that will be a boost for the overall global box office for sure. And then we just had something move, right? We just had an article where we've got Mortal Kombat 2, which was supposed to come out in October. That has been moved. That's been pushed off till next year, which I think overall for the movie was a good decision, to be honest. I like it releasing closer to a summer frame than what they were going to do. And I think they saw an opening window there. We'll get to that. But if you look at this, David Croyer's consulting and research firm, Just Watch Media, which monitors trailer campaigns and movie-going habits, found that weeks ago, only 25% of people said they prefer to wait to see a summer movie on streaming, a healthy sign. In more recent days, however, that number shot up to more than 36%. He says this hits mid-size movies particularly hard, as well as being a major reason why the sheer number of people going to the cinema may never equal pre-COVID times. And this is one of the complaints that we had with this early to PVOD stuff that Warner Brothers did with Superman, right? I didn't like the decision. I mean, and I said, all right, we can try to get inside the head of JB Perrette over there at Warner Brothers and decipher, as head of distribution, what the thought process was here. Apparently, they thought that they could make more money doing it this way a little sooner. I think it's a bad idea, and I think this is part of the reason why. People are just, the shorter and shorter window that we give films out there, the more you're going to continue to program audiences to just sit around and wait. Now, I'm a little skeptical as to, how we went from 25% of people saying that they'd prefer to wait and see a summer movie to 36%. That's a big jump in just, it says weeks ago. Like, how many weeks is weeks? How many weeks ago is that? 2 weeks, 4 weeks? What are we talking about? That's a big jump. So I don't know if there's something wrong with the, I don't know if there's something wrong with the survey, with the sampling. What's going on? That's a huge discrepancy. Or were the questions about specific movies maybe? And that could be the case where, you look back a month ago, hey, are you going to go see Superman and Fantastic Four and Jurassic Park and all this other? Are you going to go to the theater to see this? And most people, 75%, said yeah. Now we're looking at the late August and into September slate, and they're looking at those movies, and then you're going to have more people say, no, I'll wait till they show up on streaming because a movie like The Conjuring is not going to draw as much of an audience. Even Demon Slayer, as big as that is still kind of a niche anime audience, although the niche is going to perform very strongly here, it looks like, even in the U.S. So I don't know. I don't know. I question that a little bit. I don't think the studio system will fill the gap that started from the pandemic, says the founder and CEO of Just Watch. It's not as mass a market anymore. It's about an even smaller group of people going to the movies more often. So there's a lot more streaming and watching at home. Mission Impossible was among numerous tentpoles competing for male eyeballs in the U.S. There's another disappointment for this summer was that movie's performance. Before the pandemic, the studio could rely on the foreign box office to make up for any lost ground stateside. China alone could pony up $100 to $200 million, if not more. These days, a Western title is considered a hit if it earns just $50 million at the Chinese box office. Yes, and that's true. And going back to one of the comparisons we were making previous to this was, of course, talking about Man of Steel. That was another big difference, right? Man of Steel got, $65 million from China back in 2013. What did Superman get this time around? Because the Chinese market is basically dead for all American films, with extreme exception. I maybe got 10 million from China for Superman versus 65 million for Man of Steel. So again, that's a completely changed market. And again, it's not specific to any one movie. Jurassic World, even, certainly one of the better performers, across the pond over there in China, but still wasn't doing the numbers it was doing 10 years ago with the first one that came out in 2015. I don't think it was anywhere close. It'll be really interesting to see later this year what Avatar does, right? Because, again, Avatar is a big Chinese Goliath in terms of box office for an American film. Let's see what that looks like. I mean, if Avatar can't do, what did the last ones do? Forget the first one. The second one, it was almost $200 million in China alone, something like that. I gotta go pull it up. But you look at some of the stuff out there. Look, Jurassic World Rebirth also prospered in China, earning nearly 80 million. But there we go. Okay, thank you. They did it for me. 80 million for Jurassic World Rebirth. 261 million for Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom. Fallen Kingdom was terrible. It was a terrible movie. 261 million in China. That's the difference. I mean, it did 3.5 times or so, 3.25 times. That's nothing compared to 261 million for Fallen Kingdom. And consider how much cheaper the tickets were back then compared to today. Now, again, I don't know I can't give you exact figures on Chinese inflation since 2018. Sorry, don't have those. But I can almost promise you the tickets today are more expensive than they were back then. So even if we adjusted this up modestly for inflation, Fallen Kingdom pulled in 4 times, probably at least 4 times the audience than did Jurassic World Rebirth. And $80 million for Rebirth in 2025, they're right. That's a mega hit for an American film in China. That is the new era.
Make sure you're subscribed to Valiant Renegade and join us every Sunday at 6 p.m. Eastern for the live show.